Mitchell, and we're here to talk about life before, during, and after graduate school, and whether an advanced degree is right for you. I'll draw upon my experiences as a graduate dean and research mentor, as well as my network of students, colleagues, and experts to bring you the most complete information on graduate education that I can. Today, I'm going to draw upon that network of experts to talk about the National Association of Graduate Professional Students, or NAGPS for short. I'm delighted to have the president of NAGPS, Sean Schrader, with me to talk about his organization and their work. Hi, Sean.
Hey, Brian. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's great to be with you.
So let's start big picture here. How did NAGPS get started?
Well, NAGPS has really got a very interesting history. It started back in the last decade when you had a group of graduate students who were really interested in advocacy in a lot of really different important areas relating to, the big things that you hear about, whether it be student relief in terms of debt relief, in terms of advocacy in areas of mental health, and things of that nature. And they thought, of course, there is the unique makeup of all kinds of different graduate councils around the country. However, they thought, well, hey, if maybe we band together, if we had a centralized voice, that would allow us to really amplify our advocacy efforts. And so that's really what the idea brought about. And it all kind of got started in 1987. And it's been going ever since. Of course, some of the topics, I think, in terms of advocacy, maybe have changed slightly over the years. But it's that same idea of trying to bring in different graduate students and professional students from around the country to make sure they have a voice.
So where did it get started? Who were some of the key individuals that got it off the ground?
Well, it really got started with 4 schools that were attending the first National Teaching Assistant Training Conference at The Ohio State University in the spring of 1986. And this is really where it kind of came about, by these 4 schools that were in attendance. And then it was this group, when they met at The Ohio State University, that said, well, hey, maybe we have an ability here to advocate together to get more things done. And so then the group officially got founded and had its first meeting officially in March of 1987 at Washington State University. And so it's kind of cool. Of course, I'm not a geography expert, but you can see how you're in different locations, you're in different places, because those schools that were part of it initially, really are in different parts of the country, which is, I think, indicative of the importance of the organization and, maybe having different geographical backgrounds, different specific focus areas, but at the end of the day, having a centralized passion for this kind of work.
Okay, great. So how did you come to be president of NAGPS?
Well, it's actually a very funny story. I'm currently wrapping up my master's degree in business administration at the University of South Florida. In just a few weeks, I'm actually incredibly excited to be the commencement speaker. And so I thought I had a little more time to get my speech ready. And then I realized, I was reminded last week that May 1st is just a few short weeks away, which is crazy to think about. But anyway, before I did my MBA program at USF, I did my undergraduate degree in business management. And in high school, I was a part of the International Baccalaureate program, so that allowed me to do my undergraduate degree accelerated. And so as a result of that, I did my undergrad in 3 years instead of 4. And I did it in business management, thinking, well, maybe there are some different opportunities to, stay involved in a lot of different sectors with a broad degree like that. And when I was at USF during my undergrad, initially, I had no interest in advocacy or engagement, even on my campus. But after COVID, I thought, I think there's real power and value to getting involved and to being able to advocate for things you care about. And so I got involved in the student government. Last year, I served here in St. Petersburg, Florida, as the campus governor, a job very similar to that of a student body president on the campus. And when I finished that role, going into the second year of my MBA, I thought, well, maybe there are different ways I can stay involved more from a graduate student perspective. And I joined and became president of USF's Graduate and Professional Student Council, trying to help kind of organize that. And then I thought, well, I think it's important if USF is recognized at the national level and joins the National Association. And so I did that and was fortunate to join as the Director of External Affairs. And then the president called me and said, I'm going to be leaving my job, and I think he'd be a great fit to lead us forward. And so it's definitely been a learning experience. I haven't been in the job for that long yet. It's almost like drinking from a fire hose. But again, I'm just very fascinated by the diversity and the uniqueness in student groups that we get to represent, and just getting to hear different perspectives. I'm all about making informed decisions where you actually know the perspectives that help to drive the decision you're making. And I think these opportunities allow me to kind of get that full focus on that. And it's been a great ride so far, and it's a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the rest of your team. How did they come to these positions, and how do you guys interact to perform the organization's business?
Well, it's really an interesting dynamic. You have a great team of folks who are from all parts of the country. Of course, as you know, it's no secret, post-COVID, I think any organization was hit very hard. I found that in a number of local organizations I've been a part of across the university as well as across the Tampa Bay region. And so little by little, when you invest, when you build up, change really does happen, which is so critically important. And so as a result of that, we have kind of seen a change and shift in our makeup and our board, how we operate. But for the most part, we do have, some great folks that represent very different backgrounds up in the Northeast, as well as out in California and other types of places. And so it's interesting, the board members we have, whether it be the vice president, some of our directors of different areas like legislative affairs or outreach, they represent very different sides of graduate life. Of course, me being the MBA side of it is very different from getting a doctoral degree, in philosophy or something like that, for example. And so that is, I think, what the uniqueness of our board is. And as a result of that, then what I really try and do as a leader, more so than doing any kind of hand holding, it's about empowering members to get the most out of the experience that they can, especially our officers who are all very talented and capable. They're able to really take their passion for different opportunities and translate that into the work we're doing. In terms of the specific work that every board member works on, it varies a little bit. One of our biggest things, as you know, is legislative advocacy. That is constantly evolving. I think we'll talk about it in a minute, but my previous work experience comes a lot in the legislative realm and in the federal government. So I'm familiar a little bit with how, one thing that starts at 9 a.m. may be different by the time 5 o'clock rolls around in terms of the way our government is structured. And so as a result of that, being able to keep on top of those things and notify graduate students of different policy initiatives that are ongoing or ways they can share their voice is critical. Beyond that, really being top of mind and cognizant of what is top of mind for graduate students is very important. We try to do that in a lot of different ways in outreach. As you can imagine, two of the biggest and most significant things on the minds of graduate students today are in mental health support, as well as understanding the job market and how to translate that degree to additional career success. And so we are able to use, I think, our board and their talents in order to further understand those opportunities, really, and ensure that we're being their voice.
So do the other board members, are they also graduate students or graduate and professional students themselves, or are some of them like post-graduation?
Most of them, I believe all of them right now actually are all current graduate students themselves. I think we have a mix of some that are in their master's degrees and in more of the computer science, engineering types of fields, as well as more on the sports management side, as well as the doctoral side and research. So it really runs the gambit, and that's a nice thing because, again, as an MBA student, I wouldn't know the first thing about a doctoral degree in research, and so I think ensuring we have all of those sides represented is very important. And as you know, too, there is something to be said for that postdoctoral element to it as well, and ensuring students maybe that are engaging in research or something beyond a doctoral degree or master's degree can have their voice heard.
Great. Well, it sounds like you've got a good finger on the pulse of the students that you're serving. So you alluded to and mentioned some of the concerns of graduate students. We can come back to that in more detail in a minute. But what are some of the initiatives specifically that your organization is working on?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, so I used to serve as the now former district office manager for Congressman Charlie Crist when he was in Congress. And so through that experience, of course, I kind of got a unique lens into how the legislative advocacy process works. And before working in that realm, I had no idea how that process works. And so for millions of people that are frustrated or angry or want to see change happen at a federal level from the standpoint of advocacy, it can be very difficult to navigate that process and understand how all of that works. And so one of my biggest initiatives has been focused in how are we empowering our students to understand what the legislative advocacy process looks like? How does that process really, go about the navigation, so to speak, in terms of knowing how to effectively lobby for different changes you want to see happen at a legislative level? Again, the big thing right now is, student debt forgiveness, loan forgiveness. That's a major topic most people talk about. There are other topics as well. And so understanding, how do you even, A, find out who your representative is, B, how do you understand their role in the specific legislation, and C, what is the role of compromise? I think that is something that is widely misunderstood. A lot of times you can never have your cake and eat it too. So what is that compromise you can find between that legislator or that committee in order to maybe have a piece of what you're looking to get done be implemented, as opposed to, I want it all or nothing at all kind of mentality. And so that's been a big piece of this, and that we're trying to do that through a lot of different mediums. One of the most effective, I think, is skill building. I'm hearing from experts in this field that work in it every day. For example, recently we hosted a very successful town hall that brought together members of CGS, of the AAU, as well as the ACE coalition of different, higher education associations to get their perspective from experts who are all directors or senior level officials in the governmental affairs realm, to kind of hear success stories and how you can lobby effectively. That's very important. Another thing that's very important, we touched on this a little bit, but is in empowering other graduate students in kind of, that peer-to-peer advocacy type of idea. I think, as you know, we talked about this a little bit, COVID really was a significant challenge in really eroding the makeup of all kinds of organizations all over the country, not just student groups, but all kinds of organizations, and just the wants and needs and behaviors of people changed quite a bit since that all took place. And so as a result of that, one of my main focuses has been in how do we ensure that graduate student organizations know that there's value to being established on their campus, and how can they learn from their peers in terms of successful initiatives that can be taking place. And I think one of the most successful things you can be doing, again, is in this idea of networking and in terms of career readiness and in terms of skill building that can translate your, master's degree or your doctoral degree into real world opportunities. And so that's the other big thing we've been focusing on. I'll say finally, something I'm very excited to be unveiling here soon. You get the exclusive scoop that we will be embarking on this summer is a series of listening sessions where I'm going to join different graduate student organizations around the country to hear from them directly in terms of additional concerns they believe are going on and additional opportunities. I believe my role is only successful, when we get to hear very unique and important feedback, and also understanding I'm just a representative. I'm just lucky enough to be the representative and the voice, and informed decision making, I think, happens when you get to hear those very unique and different perspectives. And I think that'll be a great value from engaging in that kind of tour.
Well, that's great. You mentioned the town hall that your organization held, and I thought it was fantastic. I was able to attend and learned a lot myself. So it was very informative, and I know you're going to be doing more things like that. With respect to the lobbying effort, do you find there's a receptive audience in Congress? I mean, are the legislators willing? Certainly their aides are probably the ones that you talk to. Are they receptive to the needs of the graduate and professional student population?
That's interesting you mentioned that. I recently spoke with U.S. News and World Report on the value of getting an MBA degree. And I think it's relevant to the question because I think there is a greater divide that is happening today in the world of education in general, is to whether or not an MBA or master's degree or doctoral degree has any kind of value, when a lot of people think, well, I could just go get certified and be a skill builder and be a plumber, electrician, a welder, or, get certified in some kind of skill. And that's all that I need to do. And I don't need to get a higher education, even a bachelor's degree. And so as a result of that, then I think you see that kind of brought over with some of the staff and lawmakers that you speak with. And I'm a big proponent of the idea that I think it can coexist, right? I think both need both those who are thought leaders, policymakers, educators who benefit from those levels of higher education. And we also need the people that are mechanics and are, electricians and things of that nature. And so I think when you have that big divide, it can make it sometimes very difficult to lobby effectively because there is a misunderstanding of the need to advocate for things like having, student debt relief in place, or in providing additional opportunities for graduate students in the realm of career support, mentorship, and things of that nature. And so I think that, those are one of those things where, again, I think it goes back to this idea that if you can engage in not only advocacy, but in education to staff in terms of making them aware of why, graduate life and graduate students play a role in shaping the future. I think that's important. And I think, again, it goes back to that mentality. You approach it positively and you work to build consensus as opposed to, trying to get upset or angry, if you're not able to achieve legislative success. And so I think that's kind of the mindset I bring into it. And I think to a large extent, that's kind of what you see from a lot of other graduate students.
You mentioned that one of the key concerns in the graduate and professional student population is mental health support. Can you expound upon that a little bit? What are the kinds of services and support that graduate and professional students specifically need?
Well, I think, it's a multitude of things, right? I think one of the biggest things is this constant feeling of being overwhelmed and anxiousness. I think, for a lot of students, maybe when they go in to get a master's degree or a doctoral degree, there's some kind of promise that's made, or, more times than not, there's this kind of internal belief that, well, I'm not satisfied with the jobs or with the opportunities available with my bachelor's degree. So if I go ahead and get a master's degree, or if I want to expand that and get a doctoral degree, then, there will be more opportunities available. And so I think, as we find ourselves in a very, very competitive job market today. And so I think that it makes that type of opportunity more difficult, to be able to tangibly quantify, in the sense of saying, well, if you go ahead and get this degree, it's guaranteed that you're going to have this type of opportunity available to you. And so I think for a lot of students, if you're undergoing very intense coursework and then, having to rack up debt in the process, and then really not knowing what that next stage is in terms of career progression, I think that's a big stressor on a lot of people. And I think that definitely creates that sense of being overwhelmed. I will also say, I think another thing that has happened as a result of the pandemic Zoom technology is great, which is, how we're able to talk today and everything. But you find when people are so reliant on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever else the case may be, or using, these cell phones all the time, it creates this opportunity then where you don't have to talk to people face to face, person to person. And, for networking and things like that, that's a key skill to have. And so as a result of that, then I think when you're always online, it creates this sense of social anxiety, which can be very difficult to navigate in person-to-person contact. And so, of course, I'm not a psychologist or anything. There's only so much that can be done in that kind of space. But I think on the greater whole, what I try and advocate for and try and focus on is peer-to-peer advocacy, how that can take place, in being able to align graduate students who have faced these difficulties before, have been able to get support, have tips, have advice to match those students with those maybe they're facing those challenges. And I'll also say on a greater level too, some days I think it's easier to say than others, but this idea of being able to apply your passion, your interest in a subject area or in a matter of policy or in an opportunity to make a difference, I think is so important. I mean, we've got many challenges all over the board in a number of areas. And so I don't think any one person can solve all of them. But if you're focused in on one goal that aligns with your studies, I think that you can make big change happen little by little. I think that's a positive way to overcome that as well.
So you mentioned mental health support and the job market as key concerns from the graduate student and professional student populations. What maybe some other things that you hear as you go on these listening tours?
Well, I think, another big thing, again, is understanding, what is the role of, graduate student, life, really. I mean, what does that look like and how can that be effective? As you know, when I was in the student government, you find undergrad student life is a little different. Usually if you're there for a bachelor's degree, as you know, of course, from I'm sure your time as a dean, you see the variations in that process. And so for graduate student life, I think it can be a little more interesting, and challenging to navigate. Of course, I'm 22 years old with my almost MBA. That's very different from even my classmates getting their MBA who are in their maybe 30s, 40s, or 50s. That's fine. That's, I think very interesting to me then how you see those deviations in background when everybody's still focused on the same thing. But as a result, then it can make it more challenging to effectively engage people. And so I think, what I've been trying to tell students and what I plan to talk a lot about on these tours is the importance of meeting people where they're at. If you are a younger student like me, I think that there's a lot more value to talking about things relating to job searching and to skill building in terms of, writing your resume, having your LinkedIn up to date, all those types of things. Whereas maybe if you're a mid-career professional who's looking to make that next jump, there's a lot more value then in being able to say, well, how can you understand different opportunities available, taking on and building on your previous skill set to leverage those things in a new job and where you don't need to worry about LinkedIn. Or if you're a professor and you've recently completed, a postdoctoral degree or something like that, or you're postdoctoral fellow, how are you able then to leverage that experience in terms of different teaching or research opportunities, maybe at the university where you've been based or other locations where you can build upon connections? And so I think that, meeting students where they're at is very, very important. I think we spend a lot of time scratching our heads when you think, well, why don't students really get engaged or why is it they don't? And I think, again, it's because different students want to see different types of opportunities. And so I think if you have that mindset and that kind of approach for different local graduate councils or graduate student organizations, I think that builds upon the success you can have. And that's something I think we'll also probably be hearing a lot about on the listening tour. I also think The other big thing that's very important that we'll probably talk a lot about in the listening tour is this idea of diversity, right? As you know, in different parts of the country, it has been challenging to navigate this environment. I'm a big proponent of the idea of diversity, diverse thought, because I think it allows for different voices to be heard. You empower different voices. I think that's critical. But I think that in some places, there's this concern that not everybody feels valued or feels heard. And so I think being able to drive those points home in creating those safe spaces for graduate students to be able to talk and to share their perspectives and to ensure that they know that their voice matters, number one, and that number two, their needs are met just like anybody else, I think is very, very, very important and can be done.
Yeah, we're both in states where diversity efforts have come under intense pressure. And I think this is where national organizations like yours can be a safe space, if you will, and help empower students, as you say. So what are some of the ways that individuals or even student organizations can get involved with the NAGPS?
Well, there are a few different opportunities. We're always looking for additional leadership driven folks to join us in a number of capacities. We have a few different positions that are open right now. If you visit our website, nagps.org, and you visit our About Us section, you can see that type of stuff. But in addition to that, we also have different opportunities available from a standpoint of more ad hoc initiative-based types of things. I think one of the biggest things we just talked about, whether it's diversity, whether it's in advocacy, whether it's in mental health, being able to lobby those things and manage those things effectively is critically important. And so as a result of that, we would love to have students help us lead those efforts to engage their peers and not only understand it from a policy side, but understand it from an advocacy and engagement side to ensure that we're getting people drawn in on these things and make them aware of why focusing on these initiatives are important for the success of everybody.
So if you'll indulge me, I always like to hear from people how they made the decisions that they made. So in your case, you're getting your MBA. How did you decide to get that advanced degree and how are you going to use it?
Well, it's interesting. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier when I did my undergrad in business management. Of course, naturally as things go, usually there's intense periods of quietness, and then everything always seems to happen at once, especially big decisions that have to be made. And so as a result of all of that, I remember vividly, it was the senior year of my undergrad in business management. And I wasn't really sure what to do next. I'd done a few internships working for former Congressman Charlie Crist. I'd served as a assistant caseworker to him and helping folks get their stimulus payments from the IRS during the height of the COVID pandemic. And I got a call from his office explaining how his district office manager had just departed and they were looking for somebody to fill the role. And they wanted to know if I would do it. And of course, at 20, that was a little surprise, but an incredible opportunity and one that I knew I could not really pass up in order to really make a difference. And I felt broaden my skill set in a number of ways. And so I accepted. And it was about that time that I thought, well, what should I do next? And I thought, if I could build upon this experience now in a staff level position, managing a team of interns, leading different projects, really strengthening my communication and engagement skills in a number of ways, I think an MBA would be relevant to me because I think one of the biggest things, as you know, is I talk to a lot of students that have come straight from their undergraduate experience looking to go for an MBA or looking to go for another type of master's degree, but they don't have any real work experience. And I think personally, in an undergrad, it's fine to have a lot of simulated discussions and assignments in which you tie in hypothetical ideas or hypothetical types of scenarios. But with a master's degree, I think it's only really valuable when you can tie in the direct experiences, lived experiences really that you've had with course material, because that makes that much more meaningful. And I think then it allows you to really understand how these major concepts tie together. And I thought, well, given my experience in this realm now in government, with this management role, I think an MBA would be valuable to me. And that was really where my focus was at. And that's where I, really thought, well, maybe I should pursue it. And so I'm happy I did. Looking back on it, it's been a great experience. It's interesting. A lot of people say, well, Sean, if you have government background and government experience, why would you go get an MBA? And personally, I think that an MBA is so versatile in a number of arenas, which is important depending on the type of opportunity you want to take. For me, I'm all about having different experiences. I'm not a STEM guy by day. I think I know I won't be going for a career in that. But regardless of the field, I think it's important to build upon skill sets to further your own knowledge and further your different understanding of different ideas and concepts. So all that to say, that's why I went for the MBA. And moving forward, I'm very hopeful and optimistic to possibly have the opportunity to maybe travel abroad in the fall to Europe for a study abroad opportunity, which would be very exciting. I've always spent my time in the United States, so to have the opportunity to travel abroad would be very exciting. And then long term, I'm hopeful. My next major aspiration is to serve as a JAG officer, either in the Air Force or the Space Force. I spent some time in the past doing some lobbying and shadowing of different folks who are from the public defender realm. And so that kind of work, I think, is very meaningful. It's very important. And that's the kind of work that I kind of see myself getting into. And then maybe one day later on down the road, some kind of work that's more in the public policy realm. But I think with all the experiences with an MBA, it makes those types of aspirations possible. And I also think an MBA, is very easy to apply in a lot of those different ideas as well.
Well, that sounds really exciting, Sean. We look forward to following your career. It sounds like it's going to be very successful. So let's kind of close out here and remind our audience, if they didn't know already, that April is celebrating Graduate Students Month. What are some of the activities taking place on campuses, or what would you like to see taking place on college campuses to help celebrate our graduate and professional student populations?
Yes, I think, any type of celebration you can be doing, again, whether it's just having that recognition from campus leadership, that's a great way to start. I also think taking steps in your own community to get recognition from local governments is also very exciting. The idea of getting a proclamation or something from your local mayor or city council or even member of Congress is a wonderful opportunity. I also think what's also very important and exciting to think about is the ideas that are present in hearing from graduate students. And I think this is a phenomenal way to do it. Everybody likes free food, of course, or birthday cake to celebrate. But in all seriousness, being able to bring together your graduate student population to hear from them, hear what they're enjoying, hear what they'd like to see moving forward. I think all of those things are very important. And I think that when you have parties, you have different types of leadership panels, you have different events which bring together the diverse backgrounds of our student populations. That is the most effective way to celebrate.
Well, that's fantastic, Sean. I want to thank you for joining me today, and thank you for your insights and your expertise, both personally and as president of NAGPS. I think it's going to be very, very helpful to our listening audience. So good luck as a commencement speaker. That's very exciting, and good luck with your commencement address and life after graduate school.
Well, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you're doing in this space. It is so important to advocate for all of our students, and it's opportunities like this, which I think not only hopefully excite more students, but it's also what motivates them to get involved and really kind of connect their own passion with opportunities to make a difference locally or nationally.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for our listeners for joining me today. All of the links referred to in this podcast are available on my website at gradpost.com. That's GRAD-POST. There you'll find additional podcasts and resources to help you plan your adventure for your advanced degree. Start your 360-degree analysis today. Every degree counts.